There's nothing like Broadway, kid, nothing so grand, where each purple feather is perfectly found.
Hello and welcome to the Nothing Like Broadway podcast. I am your host, writer-composer David Rackoff of the upcoming off-Broadway musical Nothing Like Broadway, but this is the Nothing Like Broadway podcast, where every week we pick a song from musical theater and then we pick it apart to find out how it works. Today we are doing Getting Married Today from Company, music and lyrics by Stephen Sondheim.
Pardon me, is everybody here? Because if everybody's here, I want to thank you all for coming to the wedding. I'd appreciate you going even more. I mean, you must have lots of better things to do, and not a word of it to Paul. Remember, Paul, you know the man I'm going to marry, but I'm not, because it wouldn't ruin anyone as wonderful as he is. Thank you all for the gifts and the flowers. Thank you all. Now it's back to the showers. Don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today.
It's a super fun performer showcase patter song. Let me tell you a little bit about the story of Company, or actually the lack of story of Company, which is kind of really what's extraordinary about it. So it is about Bobby, who is a bachelor. He's 35. The show sort of takes place in kind of a dreamlike state a little bit, surrounding his 35th birthday. He is in New York City, and he is surrounded by all of his friends, most of whom are married and want him to get married, and it's deciding about whether or not he wants to partner up with somebody for a lifelong commitment. The show isn't a linear story. It's one of the first concept musicals, because it's basically like a lot of sketches, and I think it originally started as sketches that George Firth, the book writer, wrote just separately, and then Harold Prince was like, hey, what if we combine all those into one show and add this other character of Bobby, who is the bachelor? And so it's a weird show now, but in the early 70s when it came out, it was a really weird show. This is like years before A Chorus Line, which is sort of in the same kind of ballpark of like, it's not really a story like we think of a beginning, middle, and end. It's a show that is built around an idea. And so when Company came out, it was very, very strange. But because it was so strange, and also it's so modern, like it was so modern at the time, like it really feels like early 70s, New York City, like the orchestrations, the words, the characters, everything about it is just so specific and also so neurotic. And also there's not like the normal sort of hook of boy meets girl, falls in love, have obstacles, overcome the obstacles or don't, and then there's a resolution. Like that's not what this is. This is like sketches around a concept. I think because it was such an unusual show, when they were song spotting, they basically wanted to have some footholds. And so like the three big recognizable footholds that like as an audience member at the time, you'd be like, oh, I recognize and like that kind of song, is you have the end of Act 1, Getting Married Today, which is the song we're talking about today. The beginning of Act 2 is Side by Side by Side, which is like an old-fashioned soft shoe, let's get together and do a little dance kind of song. And then at the end of Act 2, Being Alive, which is like a big 11 o'clock ballad. And so these are sort of the three touchstones that I think let audiences feel a little bit of comfort because they are forms that the audiences already knew and loved in the middle of this weird show. So this song, this is at the end of Act 1. Amy and Paul are about to get married, and Amy is neurotically freaking out that she's saying she doesn't think she can get married, and she's having like cold feet, like a panic attack, basically. And it makes us really fall in love with the character of Amy because she's so terrified and neurotic and funny, but then ends up immediately getting married. And so it's like, oh, she's brave. She was panicking, but then she did it anyways. And so what's really interesting about this is this comes at the end of Act 1, and it is about being freaked out about what you're giving up and all the things that marriage entails, but then deciding, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway. And at the end of Act 2, basically in the exact same spot, parallel in Act 2, is the song Being Alive, which is also kind of working through the same issues, which is being worried about what you're going to be having to give up, what you're sacrificing, what the commitments are, but then deciding to do it anyways. And so it's kind of cool. It's like the other side of a coin of Getting Married Today and Being Alive are kind of the same story points, just done in very different ways. One other thing is this song, everybody calls this song Not Getting Married Today, but the song title is actually Getting Married Today, which is really interesting. I assumed until I was doing this, my notes start with Not Getting Married Today, podcast notes, but it's like, oh, no, wait, the song is not called Not Getting Married Today, it's called Getting Married Today, and so you have the dramatic irony of, even though this whole song is about not getting married, and she says not getting married a whole bunch of times, it's actually called Getting Married Today, and she does get married today. And so it's letting us know that like the writers, Sondheim and George Firth, are saying this song is about what it takes to push through these fears to get married. Musically, the song has three styles. First one is like a church with like an organ playing, operatic kind of woman who is singing. The second one is like bombastic, romantic operetta ballad. And then the third one, which is the main one, is a hard-driving patter song. It's interesting what each of these three musical styles gives us. So the church song is this woman who is played by one of the people in the show. In this song is just sort of the Greek chorus, basically. She's hearing what Amy is saying. And so as things go downhill for Amy's mental state, the church singer lady goes from being like, oh, bless this bride, everything's lovely, to then she's like, she's totally insane.
Bless this bride, totally insane, slipping down the drain, and bless this day in our hearts as it starts to rain.
And then the romantic operetta is Paul, her fiancé, where it's just a sort of generic, big, beautiful, bombastic, but kind of not specific. Like this is before Oklahoma and things got very specific for characters. Most of those old operetta ballads could be sung by any character in any show. Like you could just swap them out. That's what Paul's verses in this are like.
Today is for Amy. Amy, I give you the rest of my life to cherish and to keep you, to honor you forever.
And then the main part of the song, and the part that everybody loves and knows, is this patter song. And it's written very much like kind of a Gilbert and Sullivan patter song in that the melody either jitters around like it's either like vacillating between a couple of notes or just going couple notes down, couple notes higher, couple notes down, which is how patter songs are almost always written, because you don't want like big leaps. We've talked about this in the past on this podcast, but patter songs generally are about narrow range for reasons we'll talk about in a minute. And also just sort of not big leaps. You want it to be like little teeny tiny baby steps, but very fast teeny tiny baby steps. Like, I forget what song we were talking about, but I was saying that in a ballad, you're taking like these sort of big, grand balletic leaps. And in a patter song, you're taking like little teeny tiny feet, like a little dachshund's like walking very quickly. Where it's like, oh, it was in 76 Trombones and Goodnight My Someone, where it's basically the same song. One version of it is a patter song, one version of it is a ballad. Yeah, listen to that episode, though. It was a fun episode. All right, so in the song, the patter part is very much like Gilbert and Sullivan. All right, so let's talk about the lyrics, because that's where the money is in this song. So first, let's just dispense with Paul's lyrics, because they're intentionally not very interesting. So today is for Amy. Amy, I give you the rest of my life to cherish and to keep you, to honor you forever. Like, this is Stephen Sondheim. It's not like he doesn't know how to write specific and for a specific character. This is intentionally bland and just like generic. Like this could be sung by anybody in a love song in the last 300 years. And then the churchy hymnal woman singing in like sort of old-fashioned grandiose terms. Bless this day, pinnacle of life, husband joined to wife. The heart leaps up to behold this golden day. So she's not speaking generically. She is speaking grandly, old-fashionedly, a little bit Bible-y, a little bit Greek myth. And then she, unlike Paul, who is completely unaware of Amy's mental state, she ends up transitioning to bless this day, tragedy of life, husband yoked to wife, the heart sinks down and feels dead this dreadful day, which is very funny when you're watching the show because you just sort of assume that she is in the same sort of world as Paul, where just everything is like sunny and generic. And it's like, oh no, so you've got this one kind of operatic woman who is aware of what's happening and this one kind of operatic man who is not aware of what's happening. It's just a funny contrast. So now let's talk about the lyrics for the patter part of this song. So first and foremost, the scan, which we've talked about on a not too long ago podcast, which is how the stresses of the language that the character is speaking in and the stresses in the music need to align perfectly. This is a perfect scan, and it's so important because if it was not a perfect scan, you wouldn't be able to understand what was happening. It wouldn't be fun. It would just make you uncomfortable because it wouldn't feel real. Everything is set so unbelievably perfectly in this song, and I think that is probably the most important thing, because this is not a rhymey song, but this is a perfect scan song. So let me talk just a little bit about the meter here. when you're first learning as a lyricist, what the meter is and how to set words, you start out doing it like with poetry. Do you remember we have like a little, like the stressed and unstressed syllables, like a little apostrophe over the syllable means that it's stressed, and like a U means that it's unstressed? Like you did this, I think, in high school when you're analyzing poetry. Like iambic is unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. I think that's the right order. That's how you start doing it when you're first studying this stuff. But what you sort of realize, or what hopefully you realize, is that it's not just about is this syllable stressed or unstressed. It's that music has big and little stresses and big and little unstresses, basically, for lack of a better word. And so it's about aligning that whole bar up, not just stressed or unstressed. So this is mostly in 4/4. The patter part is in 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So the 1 and the 3 are the big stresses, and then the 2 and the 4 are unstressed. But what's important to know is that the 1 is more stressed than the 3, even though they're both stresses. So when you're doing poetry and you're doing like stressed and unstresses, you also kind of need to know what's the big stress and what's the little stressed. And here it's double time, so it's, pardon me, is everybody there? Because if everybody's there, I want to thank you all for coming to the wedding. So par happens on the 1. Pardon me, is everybody there? So everybody is on the stress, but it's on less stress. So it's, pardon me, is everybody there? Because if everybody's there. And so it's really important that those things line up properly, right? You want the big stressed words, pardon me, at the beginning of the sentence. You want to come in, pardon me, is everybody? Everybody is not nearly as stressed as par is. And so, sorry if this is a little bit in the weeds, but it is very important. And you can just sort of hear it when you're listening to a song like this, and that every single thing that she is saying is exactly as it would be stressed if she were just speaking it. And it's a patter song, so she kind of is just speaking it. Performing a patter song is incredibly hard, but also it's show-offy, so the audience appreciates how hard it is. But if you were doing that with a poorly written patter song, where the music and the lyrics are not lining up, it's just a mess. Like, it's hard to watch. And then another thing about writing patter songs, as somebody who, if you're familiar with my work, you know that I love writing patter songs, is that big words set perfectly are often easier to understand in a patter song than lots and lots of little words. So a line like, a wedding, what's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, is actually easier to understand with words like prehistoric, ritual, fidelity forever. All of these, everybody, like all these multisyllabic words are actually easier to understand if they're set right than if you just had lots and lots of one-syllable words.
Listen, everybody, look, I don't know what you're waiting for. A wedding, what's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, which is maybe the most horrifying word I ever heard, which is followed by a honeymoon where suddenly he realized he's saddled with a nut and want to kill me, which you should.
There's something very satisfying about hearing a perfectly set hard word when you're like hearing the song and you're like, oh shit, they're not just like taking it easy by using quick little easy words. They're using like, I may be coming down with hepatitis. Hepatitis set perfectly in the middle of a patter song is just satisfying and pleasurable to hear. It's a pleasurable hepatitis because it's a complicated word that's set perfectly and it's easier to understand, but it's also really impressive because when you're hearing it, you're like, wow, they set the word hepatitis and prehistoric. It's like, wow, I understood that difficult word in the middle of this patter song. Okay, so rhyming in the song is actually, for a Sondheim song and for a patter song too, there's not a lot of rhyming. Usually patter songs, not always, but like, when you think of like Modern Major General or something, or like Gilbert and Sullivan, the patter songs are usually pretty heavily rhymed. So like in Sweeney Todd, Try Pirelli's Miracle Elixir, like that's a super duper rhymey song, which is kind of a patter song. Usually patter songs are pretty rhymey. This is not. Most of the time, it's actually not rhymed at all. Listen, everybody, look, I don't know what you're waiting for. A wedding, what's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, which is maybe the most horrifying word I ever heard. At the end, there's a little bit of an internal rhyme there. But for the most part, it's not really rhymey, right? Like that's not what the song is concerned with. But then there's a couple times where it gets really, really rhymey. It's like a way for Sondheim, because this was, early in his career. This is it wasn't his first show that he did the music and lyrics for, because that was a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. You have some unbelievable, like, all-time great rhymes, like, look, perhaps I'll collapse in the apse right before you all. Like, that's all-time, great lyrics. And also, like, those are 2-syllable and 3-syllable sentences, like lines. So, perhaps I'll collapse in the apse. So, in the apse and I'll collapse are 3-syllable lines, the last syllable of which is rhymed. So that means that 2/3 of the syllables in that line are rhymed, which is really hard to do because there's just nowhere to hide. Like often to make a line, everything line up where like the rhyme is at the end of the line, you gotta do a little bit of mushing stuff around and kind of making it fit. There's nowhere to hide when you have 3 syllables in a line. It's very, very hard to do, and it's done so effortlessly here. Let's look at the story of the song just from Amy's verses, not worrying about the other people's stuff. The first verse is very polite. Pardon me, is everybody here? Because if everybody's here, I'd like to thank you all for coming to the wedding. I'd appreciate your going even more. I mean, you must have lots of better things to do, and not a word of it to Paul. Right? So that's polite. The second set of verses is societal, like how you would. I mean, you're like, I don't know what you're waiting for. A wedding? What's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual. Like you're sort of intellectualizing it. And then the first B section, which is the alternate pattern here, it's like a stress dream. I mean, this whole song is like a stress dream. Go, can't you go? Why is nobody listening? Goodbye, go and cry at another person's wake. If you're quick for a kick, you could pick up a christening. So like the B sections are where the crazy rhymes are, and that's crazy rhymes. But it's very much like, yeah, like, you know, like when you've had like a stress dream where you're like naked in class or whatever, and you're just like talking to people like, why is nobody listening? That's what the B section is. The first B section is. And then the third verse is all of a sudden now we're like amping up the neuroses. Do you want to see a crazy lady fall apart in front of you? I telephoned my analyst about it. By Monday, I'll be floating in the Hudson with the other garbage, suicide. And then lastly, we have the second B section. It's sort of like the second bridge. Go, can't you go? Look, you know I adore you all, but why watch me die like Eliza on the ice? Look, perhaps I'll collapse in the abstract before you all. The reference to Eliza on the ice, I had to look that up because that never made sense to me. Apparently it's from the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, and Eliza is the escaped enslaved person who does escape on the ice. And so, you know, making the parallel of marriage to slavery is, you know, extreme, but that's the state of mind that this person is in. And then at the very end, you have the thank you for the 27 dinner plates and 37 butter knives and 47 paperweights and 57 candle holders. Like, that's sort of not that hard to write or to say, but it's so impressive sounding. Like, it just sounds like, how is this person doing that? Even though it's just 27 dinner plates, 37 butter knives, like if you're just going up 10 each of them. But it sounds so good. 27 dinner plates and 37 butter knives and 47 paperweights and 57 candle holders, right? Like it's such a hot doggy sort of way to like show off for the performer and for the writer at the end of a song. Like it's like the button. And then it ends with her actually getting married. And then that's more or less where Act 1 ends, depending on whether or not they want to add in Marry Me a Little. So let's talk about the performance of the song. This song is very much a performance-based song. It's you know, lyricist showing off and performer showing off. It's doing something to the actor. In improv, it's called pimping, which is where you are setting an actor up to do something incredibly hard, but then if they do it, like, it's awesome. So, like, if you were in an improv scene with somebody and you're like, oh, hey, Tony, show me that operatic tap dance number that you did the other day. I'm pimping the other person because I'm not the one who has to do it, but I'm saying, hey, do it. So now he has to do it, basically, because it's an improv and you have to say yes. So now he has this opportunity to, like, tap dance and sing opera, but it's also like, you know, It's a you know, you're challenging this person, and that's what this song is. This song is pimping the person who was playing Amy, or in the recent gender switched revival, Jamie. It's an incredibly challenging thing to do, but if you do it well, you win awards and you bring the house down. I love writing this kind of thing, something where you really challenge the actors. Like I had an actor friend of mine once who had like this incredibly hard thing that I had written for her, specifically for her, and she's like, I can't tell if you like love me or hate me that you're making me do this. And like the answer is, I love you. Like that's why you give an actor a really hard thing to do, is because it's really fun then when they do it. And that's this song. Like this song is incredibly intimidating. Like if you were cast as Amy or Jamie in the gender bent version, you would be like, oh shit, can I really pull this off? But then you also, once you do, you're going to feel awesome and thank, you know, the writer for giving you this unbelievable do or die performance opportunity. So a couple of other things about the performance of the song. One is that in the verse, I'll be floating in the Hudson with the other garbage, it's kind of an impossible verse. Like it's sort of where everybody kind of runs out of breath. And so like there's a documentary about the recording of the original cast album of Company. And in that, they actually show what they did, which is she basically just takes a breath and then they go back in and have her just sing the word that she omitted and they edit it together. Like it's like an editing cheat basically on the cast album that you couldn't do in real life. Other like ways that people have handled this, you can just skip a word, which is not the end of the world. There's like a place around there that you can just plan ahead. Okay, I'm just going to skip this word. The audience gets where we are in this. And then the thing that Matt Doyle did in the recent Broadway revival with Patti LuPone is that he inhaled on a couple of words, which sounds crazy. It sounds like he's like having an asthma attack, but it's totally appropriate and funny. So he's like, da-da-da-da-da. Like as he's saying the words, he's inhaling, which is a very funny choice. We all know what's going on. We all understand that we're watching a performer sing a really difficult song. And so by making it like a bit, it's a really creative way to catch a quick breath. And then the other thing you could do is you can basically just like rush really fast, take a breath, and then rush again so that you're sort of squeezing the lyrics together so that you have a little bit of extra space, which is probably not the best way to do it just because you really don't want to get out of tempo on a song like this. Like part of the challenge is doing it in tempo, but it's a problem that needs to be solved because it's kind of impossible to sing that particular verse all the way through. So I was just thinking about, for performing a patter song, because I'm somebody who loves writing patter songs, I love performing patter songs, I've directed a lot of people doing patter songs. So I'm just going to give you a couple of quick little David's tips for performing a patter song. First one is just be good at breathing and singing and acting. Like all of your skills that you worked on with your voice teacher for singing like your big ballads are going to really come into play. Like you need to be more of a technical singer in order to pull off a patter song. Second thing is plan your breaths. Don't just sort of like, I'll breathe when I need to. You need to go through, plan it out, write a little comma above the line so that you know where you're supposed to be breathing. Because a lot of times what you need to do is to plan ahead and not just breathe when you run out of air, but if you know that, okay, here's a quick little gap, I can take a quick catch breath, or I can suck in a bunch of air to make sure that I have as much breath as I can, because later on when I'm going to be out of breath, I'm not going to actually have time to breathe. And so the more you can sort of intellectually plan it out before you actually start performing it, the better. Start slower than you think so that you can increase the tempo. Like sometimes people think that patter songs are faster than they are, and they start more measured than you would think, because you want to have somewhere to go so that it can keep on getting more and more impressive. Like patter songs are you're a character in the moment in the story of the show, yes, but we also all get that this is a show-offy, show-stoppy performance number, right? Showmanship, you want to start a little slower so you can get a little faster. And also, if you start too fast, even if you get the words out, we're not going to be able to hear them. Like, even if you enunciated everything perfectly, if you're going too fast, there's just no way we're going to understand what you're saying, and then it makes the whole thing less impressive. Having said that, though, sometimes, especially toward the end of a patter song, going a little bit faster is actually easier because even though you're getting more words out, it's taking less time. So, if you're a little bit faster, instead of having to go 25 seconds without taking a breath, you might only have to go 20 seconds without taking a breath. So you want to sort of play around with that when you are working the song to find out if if I do the last verse a little bit faster, it actually makes it more possible for me to get through it without breathing than if it were slightly slower. The biggest tip is to over-enunciate with your mouth. So sometimes people think that if they just make little teeny tiny movements with their lips, it'll make it so they can be more nimble and go faster, which makes some sort of intellectual sense, but it's actually the opposite. You want to overdo your mouth movements and your jaw movements when you are singing a patter song. It just makes the whole thing easier to understand. Somehow it makes it easier to breathe just because you're being so intentional with your mouth movements. You're not just like trying to like skate by, you're trying to really be like boom, boom, boom and make it really crisp. And also it makes it easier for the audience who's watching you to understand because they can kind of read your lips. So overdo the mouth movements when you're doing a patter song. Don't be louder than you need to be. And if you have the option of what key it's going to be in, put it in a comfortable key. This is not a time for having really low notes or really high notes. You want it to just be in like a real easy spot in the middle of your range. They're not usually that rangy. So if you have the option of moving the key around, move it to the easiest key you could put it in. And then acting wise, the more crisp acting beats you can work in, the better. Like you want to treat a 3-minute patter song like it's a 30-minute monologue when you're working on it with your director. And you want to work the acting and you want to make it really crisp so that you're going from, this 2 bars is this emotion, then this next 2 bars is a totally different emotion. And the more ping-pongy you can be back and forth with that, the more fun it's going to be. And the only way to do that is to just work it really slowly. Like earning the next line is a big thing when you're working a monologue. You want to do that with your patter song, and you're going to have like 70 next lines that you need to earn. And then when you start to, as you work on it, you get more and more comfortable with it, and you can start to compress it. And all of a sudden now, and if you watch the really, really great performances of this song, which we'll talk about in a minute, they're doing that. Like it's not one song. It is like a 1-act play that's like 35 minutes worth of dramatic journey crammed crisply into this 3 minutes. So when you're working it, forget that it's a patter song, treat it like it is heavy drama that takes place over 30 minutes. All right, so let's talk about some notable performances of this. I mean, this song is almost always well performed in the versions that you're going to find on YouTube, just because why would somebody who can't do this be cast? Why would somebody who can't do this want to do this? And so you get like really heavy hitters who know, like there's not anybody who sings this song, on Broadway or something, who doesn't know going into it that, wow, this is going to be like the Everest of my technical and acting and performance skills. And they know that and they do the work and it shows. So Beth Howland was the original Amy. She's awesome. Recently, there was a revival on Broadway where the genders of some of the characters were swapped. And Matt Doyle won a Tony Award for this character. And it was end of Act 1. It just stopped the show. They had the really fun, creative staging. And he is just like so crisp in everything he's doing, but also so emotional. And so it just was technically so perfect, but he's also having this real nervous breakdown, which is hilarious. And he was great. So if you want to see a video of him doing that, that's great. That same production before it came to New York was in London, also with Patti LuPone, but with the gender swapped. And the person who played this role was Jonathan Bailey, who is Fiyero in the Wicked movie. And he's amazing. He won an Olivier Award, which is like the British Tony Award for it. So you can look that up and you can see like, oh shit, like Jonathan Bailey is even better than we thought he was. Other notable great performances of this. Oh, Madeline Kahn does a funny one. And then maybe my favorite is Katie Finneran. There was like a concert of it with, I think, Neil Patrick Harris as Bobby. And she does this very like understated, I don't know, she's just a very funny person and is also just so technically, like her breath control and her diction are so perfect. That might be my favorite version of it. I don't know. It's hard to say. Every time I see one of these, I'm like, that's my favorite version. And then also there is a Sondheim giving a masterclass on this song. And so you can see him work with the actress who is singing the song, and he's just like an unbelievable director. Like having Stephen Sondheim coaching you as to how to sing this song, it's amazing. So if you're an actor or just anybody, look up the Stephen Sondheim masterclass on Getting Married Today. And then there's a documentary about the making of the cast album of Company, which is a great thing to look up. It's amazing. And they have the song is featured in it. And then one more thing is there is a parody documentary of the Company original cast album documentary, which is incredibly niche. But if you're familiar with the actual documentary, definitely watch. It's called Documentary Now. It's like John Mulaney wrote it or co-wrote it. A bunch of amazing people are in it. So they have a parody of Getting Married Today. I'm not even going to tell you what the title is because you'll see. So I'm just going to play you a little clip of, this is Alex Brightman, who is Broadway's Beetlejuice, singing a parody of Getting Married Today in this documentary that is a parody of the making of the Company cast album documentary, which is very, very inside baseball. But so I'm going to play that clip right now.
Mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled.
If I'm being honest, it was all very harrowing when the invite came for an evening of caroling. I don't like singing, I'm not much for conversation, and the combo of the two gave me such hesitation. I took a little something just to dull all the edges, either that or I was certain to be jumping off the ledges. I'm really quite sorry, but I'm going to admit it. I'm really so sorry. If I could, I would quit it, but the fact of the matter is I did a little cocaine tonight.
God rest
Which is screamingly funny to me. Like, just the idea of making fun of a patter song by being the only reason somebody would be talking like this as if they were coked up is just such a brilliant idea. But anyways, this has been the Nothing Like Broadway podcast. I am writer-composer David Rackoff of the upcoming off-Broadway musical Nothing Like Broadway. Please follow us at Nothing Like Broadway on Instagram. If you have a suggestion for a song for us to break apart, please email me nothinglikeBroadway@gmail.com. And let's go out listening to Beth Howland from the original Broadway cast of Company singing Getting Married Today, music and lyrics by Stephen Sondheim.
But why watch me die like a Liza on the ice? Look, perhaps I'll collapse in the abs right before you all. So take back the cake, burn the shoes and boil the rice. Look, I didn't want to tell you, but I may be coming down with hepatitis, and I think I'm going to faint. So if you want to see me faint, I'll do it happily. But wouldn't it be funnier to go and watch a funeral? So thank you for the 27 dinner plates, 37 bottom knives, 47 paperweights, 57 camera holders.
One more thing.
I'm not getting married. But I'm not getting married. See, I'm not getting married.
I beware.
Still not getting married. I was praying that we're not getting married. Yeah.